We live in an age of instant communication. It's just easy to share a message. But what would you do to share good news 500 years ago? Well, there was word of mouth, chatting over a meal, around a fire, on the street. Cultures communicated for centuries this way. That was until the postal service was introduced. King Henry VIII set up the original version of the postal service in 1516, which was then made into a service fully available to the public in 1635. This postal sorting car would have been a staple of the National Postal Service. Carts like this one would have been used to sort and distribute posts all over the country, dropping off bags of letters as the train passed through each town. These would have been the main form of communication available to the public for over 2 centuries. That was until the invention of the telephone in 1876. At first, telephones were just in boxes on the streets, but soon they were introduced into homes. Switchboard operators were replaced by automated systems, and just a few decades later, we were all sharing news via email. Fast forward to today, and it's never been simpler or faster to share a message through our smartphones. Whether it's texting, Messenger, FaceTime, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, our world has never communicated more than we do today. The way we share news is constantly changing. But what hasn't changed is that we still want to share good news. As a community of believers, I hope we all feel able to share the good things God is doing in our lives with one another. When we share these stories, we build faith, spark excitement about what God is doing in our lives and our communities. But what about when it comes to sharing those things with people who don't yet know Jesus? When we look at Acts, we see the early church doing just that, sharing what they had seen and heard about Jesus. Sometimes the things that the early church did seem scary and overwhelming. But the key is, they were just ordinary people whom the Spirit used to communicate extraordinary news. God's Spirit encouraged His people to step beyond what they thought was possible, and often beyond their own comfort zone. Just think about Philip sharing Jesus with the Ethiopian eunuch. Philip could never have anticipated the outcome of his boldness in that moment. He just chose to be obedient. The result, however, is we see the good news spread through God's Spirit at work in people's lives. Every time the believers stepped out in obedience, we see the Spirit had already been preparing the way for them. Sometimes sharing stories about our faith can seem daunting, but the good news of Jesus is worth sharing. And we just don't have to share the big moments of transformation. I remember once praying for a non-Christian at an event. I felt led to share this simple word about labels. He started crying as he really connected with the sense of labels being put on him all his life. I asked him if he'd like to give his life to Jesus, and he said yes. When we step out in obedience with what the Spirit prompts us, we get to invite people into God's greatest story. Whether they're instant, gradual, or reflective encounters with Jesus. As we share these stories with others, it helps them see God is at work in our lives. And we can be excited about how they might respond. Sometimes we worry that they might not respond well. Perhaps they'll ask a difficult question or be skeptical. But more often than not, I found that God has gone ahead of us and paved the way with our friends and family. So when the Spirit prompts us to share these stories, we can remember the way He was faithful to His people in Acts and trust He can be with us, preparing the way today. As we step out, we know that we're not alone. In our world of communication, there are so many ways to share stories, and there are so many stories fighting for our attention. So how do we as Christians make sure people get the opportunity to hear the story of Jesus? And how might the Spirit be prompting us to boldly communicate the work He is doing in our lives?